Hey, how you all doing today? Let's do it to it. Excuse me. All right, we're going to be looking at a game between W. Brown versus Jeremy Silman. It's the American Open 1998. Sorry. So we're going to be putting it in a study. We may have to do another study, so we're getting close to probably filling up our study pad. Let's see. Nope, we got another spot, so we have enough room. This must have been a year before this tournament here. And he's white again, so. But this is the American Open one. American Open. Want to make sure I have that spelt right. Yep, got the player spelt right. Got that spelt right. Got that one spelt right. And I got that one spelled right. Perfect. Okay. Now let's take a look at this. Okay. So d4, d5. This is more positional at this point when they go d4, d5. And then Jeremy, I'm going to have to actually turn the board because Jeremy Silman's black. And so Jeremy Silman's opponent is going to play the Queen's Gambit, and Jeremy Silman played the Slav defense, which is a very solid structure. Very tactical too. Oops, I had the wrong spot. Very tactical position. Knight f6. It does a couple things. It allows your queen to come out. This is kind of the idea of allowing the queen to come out. Kind of to take advantage sometimes. If a bishop comes here, there's kind of an idea if the knight's not there, you can slide over and grab it. A little trick. There's tricks to the move. Knight c3. It's just this position is a lot easier to develop for the for black, I mean for white. C takes d. A4 is always a vital move. You have to play A4. If you play something like trying to set up maybe a French like bishop here, you actually have a B5. I understand that he could play A4 now, but it's not as strong because now you got B6 or A6, and if takes. He does have a tactical trick there, so that's a little tactical trick. So you got to be careful. You really can't play A6. So probably the next move would be B4. The knight has two moves to go to. Probably the best would be knight there. But then we have a sharp attack here. He has to come in there. And then now Jeremy Silman's threatening, he'd be threatening this move and then this move here. Just a lot of extended pressure. So, not worth going down. That's why they always play A4. This is kind of like a standard move. So Jeremy Silman goes knight f5. Why not get all your pieces out, make your bishop good before you play e6? So he knows he's going to eventually lose this pawn on c4. Let me see. Okay. e3 so that the bishop can acquire the pawn, and then e6. Bishop takes. You don't have to take right away. You could actually, if you wanted to, develop first with like bishop d2 if you wanted to. Then after like bishop d3, then you could take if you wanted to at this point. So you could do that. Or if you didn't want to play bishop there, you could, in theory, try a different way of maybe like queen. I don't know, maybe that is the best move. I really don't see anything better than that. So that looks like the best move. It's pressurizing the knight, so now castles. And then he castles, Jeremy Soman does. Queen e2. And then e4. Oops, that was wrong. It's 09. Oh, bishop. No, that is it. Bishop g6. Knight e5. Bishop bd7. This is so that. Hey, how you doing? So that if takes here, Jeremy Soman will actually take back on h5. That's cool. It's good to hear. It's always fun when you are studying chess. Knight takes e5. D takes e5, and then knight d7. I know you're thinking, whoa, you're going to lose a piece. No. The saving grace is knight d7. And then f4 to kind of keep some structure. But if you notice one thing, if we step back right now and we kind of take a quick gander at the position or a look, we can see that Jeremy Soman has acquired a very important imbalance. He has the two bishop. I mean, not two bishops. He has the queenside majority. No, not yet. Not lately. No. So this. So we have to remember that these pawns, even though they're compact together, the pawns on the king side, he has doubled ones. So it's going to be pretty hard for him to make a break. It's going to be a little bit slower. He's going to have to get a break similar to that. And that's going to take like two moves where Jeremy Soman can make a pass pawn in basically one because of how compact his pawn structure is on the queen side. So these small changes, small tweaks in the position really affect the overall I guess music of the position. I like music, so we'll call it the harmony of the position, which that there's inside of music there's certain types of harmonic music terms and sounds. This one is playing okay for white if you want to think about it, if you're music prone. But this one right here is playing like a beautiful orchestra for black. This one's playing good. You know, it's still good. It's not like Jeremy Soman could take advantage of it anytime soon. But you always got to think about endgames. You judge your pawn structures, and then you can see if you want to head into an endgame. Because in this situation, if black did head into an endgame, if all the pieces came off the board but the kings, surprisingly, black would have a slight advantage because of the queen side. I know I'm talking a lot, but these are critical points that you have to look at, and you have to find the imbalances when you get I like to say we call it the imbalance app. It's a joke because you have to get that vision when you're doing chess, so that when you're looking at the board, you're not just looking at piece like value a queen. In one of the games, it was Mr. Mayo who traded a queen for a knight and a bishop and a pawn. but the difference was he stopped all counterplay, all pawn breaks of his opponents. And even though he was 7 pawns for 9, those 7 pawns, those 7 pawns, yeah, were actually more effective than his queen. It's kind of weird. You have to look at that as imbalance. Imbalances are important. Okay, we'll continue on, because we'll stop from time to time and analyze some of these positions, because that's the only way you get better, is by looking at the positions, seeing the imbalances, and then improving. So knight a2. This Jeremy Silman's opponent is trying to kick this bishop out because it's very well placed. He goes all the way back, bishop e6, e7. The reason he goes bishop e7 is where's the king castled? Basically, the king is castled on the king side for white. So why not just get the position a little bit, the bishop a little bit closer to the king side? And this also gets the bishop out of any attacks. I know what you are probably thinking, probably bishop here, but the only sitch is this gets white's pawns more active, more down the board, and it kind of stifles Jeremy Silman's pawn breaks for the queen side. And why give your opponent any tempos? So he just did that, and now if white wanted to play b4, more of the merrier, he actually gets a move now. It's not with tempo. Let me get a drink of tea 1 second. We'll get right back in this. All right, let's do it to it. Okay, so we're at 15 now. e4. This is a very important move. He has to, Jeremy Silman's opponent has to get this in. Nah, it's just TT. It's really not. It's just T. Let's see. Then knight to c5. Just I just drink standard good. It's just T, regular T. And so knight c5 is important. Actually, this move here allows for the queen to be able to be mobile now. And yeah, it's kind of really interesting how this pawn move, actually e4 pawn move, really did affect white's position, because white's going to want to play f5, but that actually drops a pawn. So, and this knight actually stops the bishop from going to d4. Black would, surprisingly, if bishop d4, black would probably take the bishop because he doesn't want any counterplay on the light squares. Now Jeremy Silman would acquire the bishop advantage, and now you have a potential queen b6, or potentially bishop, a bishop move if you want to keep your queen there. But I think queen b6 is pretty strong, but bishop c5 is strong probably too, because this allows you to get a rook in. So we just talked about rooks, how powerful open files are. So knight c5, knight c3. So his opponent is playing more principled, of trying to defend the e-pawn with a knight, so the queen can be able to move again, white's queen. So rook f d8. Jeremy Silman with every move is making his position better. So you have to always think, how can I, if you don't have a plan or you don't have an attack at the moment, you got to ask, how can I make my position better while stifling my opponent's position? And this puts the question to white: are you going to trade, friend? And if you don't trade, I will trade when the knight or queen, we'll just say the queen takes back. You then can slide the other rook to d8, and then you dominate the open file at that point, the d file. So rook f1. He has to get off. Oh, sorry, not e1. A little too far there. Rook f1. So this has to be played here. And the reason they want to play it is his opponent wants to play f6 here, or f5, and try to trap the bishop with g4. And so that's kind of the idea. So Jeremy Silman now has to react to this type of a threat. You can actually play h6 and welcome this type of a position in. And we're probably going to see some sort of imbalance here. So it's going to be interesting to see what he actually plays. Queen d7, interesting. This does actually stop this move here. Surprisingly, you'd say, what does queen d7 do? If this is played, the bishop could actually take because it's protected by the queen. So these subtle moves of the queen gets more, black gets more domination over the d file, plus he stops his opponent's plan of f5. How more beautiful can that be? You know, you're developing, making your position even better, and potentially you have queen to d4 with major activation, and the pawn is attacked on e4, but you don't want to do that right now because you'd potentially lose your bishop. So but actually no, you wouldn't, would you? Because you would have a you could check at that point, couldn't you? Yeah, this would be check. I was wrong. This would be check, and then the king would probably have to move, and then you could potentially take with the knight at that point. Wow, that would be strong. That's probably his idea. Very, very good idea. Wow. Now black's all in. Black's going berserk. What about e3? Well, e3. Oh, e3. Interesting. Yeah, that potentially could be played. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That could be parried by this move here. Could be parried by this. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That is an interesting move. H6. Oops, not H6. Oops. F5. No, not F5. G4. Sorry, I had that. Now H5 or H6, not H5, and then F5 here. Bishop H7. The whole idea is if black wants to take here, let's say black took here, the knight would be more than happy to live on e6. This shuts down any of black's attacks. The bishop can't. There is no double attack on f7. So this is a wonderful position for black. And if the bishop tried taking, the queen would be more than happy to be there too. And then now you would have a bishop check, you have this under fire, you have that under fire. Everything is like just, and then you even have this, but I know it's protected, but look at how much stuff you have that's attacked. I know some of it's defended, but you always got to look at the attacking potential, and black has so much and white has basically 0 to none of any attack to save the position. Okay, so here after bishop, bishop e3 was played. This is actually what's played in the game. And then queen c7, because when these moves were played, that pawn ended up becoming a weak spot. So now this is a vulnerable point that could be taken advantage of. So you have to always be on the lookout. When f5 was played, it gave up something. It gave up the protection of e5. And so Jeremy Silman jumped on that as quick as possible and played queen c7 with tempo on on white. f6. This kind of is forced. Black has to go. I mean, white has to go all in. Otherwise, the e pawn's gonna fall. Bishop f. And surprisingly, he does take here, and then bishop, and then king takes. Interesting. Wow. Oh, I see why they have to keep in. If you took here, this would be a blunder because of that. Gotcha. So king has to take here. This it kind of looks funny, like, oh no, the king's exposed. Not really. Jeremy Silman even says in here that a piece or a square can only be a weakness if it can be attacked or occupied, and there's really no way for white at the present moment to take advantage of this king being exposed on g7. And the knight's probably going to hop maybe back into d7 and try to take scope on e5, which would be a double attack on that pawn. So, or yeah. So king there, g5 is trying. Now this is an important move here, very important move. At this position, Jeremy Silman wrote a little bit. He's explaining why he set up this position. This position is easily read. Black's king is vulnerable and needs to be cared for. White's king's pawn structure is a mess. Quite simply, Black will have the advantage if he can find a safe haven for his king. So if Black can find a safe haven for his king, he'll have an advantage because of how many pawns for white are just decimated around the king. It was Josh Waiskins who said that his teacher Bruce Bonafini always told him that when you push pawns around your king, you're giving your opponent air to move, which means spots for the pieces to jump in. So you have to always be on guard about that. Note how I didn't mention the threat of g takes h6. The reason is that one should have a firm grasp of the imbalances and the goal that their extent would create. Basically, their whatever they play, whatever, like a pawn, if it did take, that would expose the king even more, because what the king could hide on h8, and the bishop would be able to go to e7, and then the rooks would start flooding into the king's side, and it would not be a pleasant experience for white, because white would be open to the world for an invasion. And the goals, let me see, creations. Before thinking about threats and responses to them, now that we know what both sides are trying to acquire, or achieve, both are trying to achieve. Acquire and achieve, same word, but that he wrote achieve. White wants to attack the enemy king. Black wants to find a safe home for it, and then take advantage of white's weakened central pawns. The correct move for black will be made perfect the correct move for black will make perfect sense at this point. Is bishop g6 exclam is the perfect move. This is a beautiful, because this the king needs safety, and instead of going, black's not worried about going after white's king at the present moment. He has enough sweet targets to go to in the center. In a couple of the games that I played in the past, I actually got a really good French defense, and rather than go after the king, I basically disintegrated the central pawns of white, which then allowed my pawns to get rolling, and my opponent had to worry more about my central pawns, and then therefore I was able to launch a kingside attack after that. But I didn't just go all guns blazing in and you know, just going to everything. I made sure that my position was good and that there was no weaknesses. My king was safe, and then we took advantage. I took advantage with my pieces, and eventually, my opponent overextended, and it ended with a resignation. This was played instantly. His opponent hoped for h takes g. This is actually what Jeremy Soma's opponent hoped for, h takes g, and then queen to h5, and then this would cause a lot of chaos in the position. When white's pieces are getting uncomfortably close to black's king. However, all of a sudden, after bishop g6, this move here, after this move was played by Jeremy Soman, black's weak point f7 is cemented, and the h5 pawn is no longer a landing space for the white queen, and are solidly defended. Basically what he's saying is the f pawn here, I'll show you what he's talking about. This pawn is, oops, I gotta do this. This pawn's safe, and if he were to play pawn takes h6, all the king has to do is go over to h7, and he's fine, and there's no weaknesses, and white still has these thorns in his side that he has to guard and babysit. Okay, let's continue on. And white's position begins to basically crack, and under the weight of it start collapsing. Basically, if you put something like on an old rickety bridge, if you put too much weight, the bridge will collapse. Basically, if black's king can have a safe haven to go to, white's position will collapse under how many weaknesses that white has. Why is he's asking, basically he's asking us, why is bishop g6 a hard move to find? Why was bishop g6 a hard move to find? We've been considered to avoid losing. We've been conditioned. Sorry, we've been conditioned to avoid losing material. So bishop g6, in theory, looks very like, wait a second, you're giving a pawn up. And in this case, you are giving up a pawn with check. So the mind automatically screams, don't let him take it, and blinds you to all other possibilities. So in this position right here, we're like, it's hard to find the bishop g6, because the principles that we're taught is you don't want to go down a pawn. If you're down a pawn, man, that's bad, really, really, really bad. But how we're learning is, what is the drawback to that? If we take it, it allows white's pieces to just flood in, and basically the game will be game, set, and match, and white will win. But with bishop g6, yes, we lose a pawn, but our king is cemented. Our king and the f pawn is cemented. Everything is beautiful. The king has a safe haven to go to. Eventually, the bishop on f1 will, or f8 will take h6 at the right time. e5 is a weakness. e4 is a weakness, and all that can be taken advantage of pretty soon. But we would have to go past sometimes of the, like what he's saying, the conditioning that we get with instead of looking at it as, you know, a loss of material, we need to look at it as a gain of positional advantage and king safety. So if you take away the material loss and then you go into a something that we've learned about our king, you can say, just put aside the material and say, my king needs to be safe. And if my king needs to be safe and my opponent has tons of weaknesses or a tremendous amount of weaknesses, all I have to do is safety my king, and then I could start my onslaught in the center. Yeah. Hey, bishop g6 comes to mind at that point. Okay. In this case, you give up a pawn with checks, so your mind automatically screams, don't let him take it, and blinds you to all other positions. That's why creating an imbalance original base of knowledge about every position. So what you have to do is, that's why creating an imbalance basically original way of looking at it, base of knowledge about every position. I'm going to turn the page. You reach is so important. Knowing a positional principle allows you to step beyond the emotional mind and make decisions where logic and not emotions rule. So let's reread that one more time at this point. Knowing a positional priorities. Knowing positional priorities. I had the wrong word. Knowing positional priorities allow you to step beyond the emotion. First of all, the emotional mind, and make decisions where logic. So take out emotions. Look at logic. Look at the logic of the position, and not emotions will rule. So we want to take away the emotional look at loss of material for the logical understanding of king safety. It's very important. I'll even underline that. That's really good. I like that. I'm even going to underline it in the book. That's really a power. So that later on when I go over it again, I can that will scream out at me to also apply to my own play. So h takes g6, or g takes h6, check. If he tried b4, queen takes e5 is the answer to that. And then after takes, you just take there, and now you're up a pawn. But then they could take here, and then king h7. You're still fine. So king h7 here. White's a pawn ahead, but he says white's a pawn ahead, but the bits on e5 and e4 and h6 are like, he says, ripe fruit that black can pick whenever he wants to. Equally important is black's king's new situation. It's found some welcome cover on h7, and white's pawn on h6 actually plays a role, he says, of a traitor, because the queen and bishop can't get there, since it all of a sudden gives shelter to the opposing king. I felt very comfortable here, he said, but both of us now had only three minutes to make 16 moves. So they both had 3 minutes. They had 3 minutes to make 16 moves till until they made time, as I like to say, which allows you to have 30 minutes all the way up to an hour. There's 30-minute sudden deaths ones, and then there's hour ones for the bigger tournaments. White played bishop f4, and then black played bishop e7. The critical move in my original intent was to actually have played this move here, rook d5. Wait a second, rook d5 can't be right. Oh, sorry, rook d4. There we go. Exclam. Bishop e3, rook a d8, getting the full control rule, and this is an exclam move. Very, very strong. All of Jeremy Silma's pieces are active. He's got a safe king. Bishop takes. D4. Bishop takes D4. Wait a second. Hold on. Oh, my bad. It's not D3. Bishop takes D4. Bishop takes D4. Remember takes D4. Rook a D1. Rook takes D1. Rook takes D1. Queen takes E5. When black has all the play, but H4, H5 ghosts began to nag at me, and having no time for a deep look to rationalize it, and one out, basically in rationality, one out, he said, and I decided to stop the H pawn in its tracks. I passed on this move. He says there's another move that you can play, knight d7, due to h4. And so he actually stopped the idea of h4 by bishop e7 because that's covered now. Rook f2. And then rook d7 or d4. Going after e5, he said. You can also do that, he says, by this move too, which is interesting, and it's an interesting move, but I don't like it. Was also tempting, but the clock was ticking, and I decided ticking, and a decision had to be made. Basically, the clock was ticking, and a decision had to be made, so I just played that. Rook g2, rook g8. This is so if the rook were to take try a piece sacrifice or exchange sacrifice, the rook would take back and recover up the king. Bishop e3. He played queen takes e5, which is actually a dubious move. Jeremy Silma did. I had been, he says, he had been trying to sacrifice the exchange all through this game, and now I jumped at the chance. However, this was not the best moment to do so. And after this move here, this is actually a better move, rook d7 would have left black firmly in charge if bishop f4 is strongly met by bishop to f6. because of the pin here, the pin on the bishop. And this is a sclam move. So queen e5, bishop takes bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, king h1. I thought that I stood better here, but I quickly looked and was convinced. It convinced me that things are actually far from clear. He actually took a draw here. This was where he did a draw, so I'll put a square where the game stopped. He says this could have been what was played. He says he could have played this. He says that king takes h6 here was actually is better with with an edge is better. This is a slightly better one, but it didn't occur to me during the game to actually do that. So he played this, and then bishop d3, knight takes c3, bishop takes check, b takes c, queen takes c3, rook f1. Wait a second, that's... Hold on, what did I miss here? Oh, rook takes g. I knew I missed something. B takes c. Hey, how you doing? Queen takes c3, and then rook to f1. Bishop f6. Rook takes g6. King takes g6. With no time left, neither side wanted to touch this position. I should point out that offering various material imbalances is part of many high respected openings. We'll stress positional sacrifices here and not attacking sacrifice spaces. Thank you. A few examples. This is actually, I think we're going to be going over into a dragon opening. So we'll take a look at this. Oops, let me. Oh, you've reached 64, so I have to go create another. Bear with me for a second. I have to create another study. Let's see what. Gotta make sure. Hold on. I want to make sure that I have the right name. Hold on. One sec. Give me a second. How come this isn't coming up? I don't understand this. 1 second. Okay, how to reassess your chess. Okay. How to reassess your chess. see how we're doing on time. Perfect. We have enough time to do one more game. Let me get a drink. We'll get started. So e4, c5, knight f3, d6. Here takes. Knight takes f6. Knight c3, g6, bishop e3, bishop g7, bishop e2, castles, knight c6, knight to b3, bishop e6, f4, knight e5, f5, bishop c4. That can't be right. Wow. I want to make sure just give me 1 second. I appreciate your patience here. Just want to make sure I have this all right. I guess that's bishop c4. Wow. Oh, I know where I went awry. That can't be right. Oh, h5 isn't right. That's why. It's a5. That makes more sense. I put the wrong knight in move. Hey, I was wondering why, because that just wins a pawn. I was like, that's just too perfect there. And now that makes more sense. The knight protects the bishop. Knight takes. Bishop takes. Queen takes. Queen takes. And then g4. This position was once thought of as quite dangerous for black, but when they discovered quite dangerous for black, but when the discovery of rook a c8 exclam was thought of, and then g5 was played, there was a sacrifice here. Rook takes c3. G takes f. Rook takes e. Queen takes. Bishop takes. It hits the street the whole line was recognized as incorrect for white. Why is this acceptable for black, aside from the fact that he has a pawn for the exchange, making the material investment minuscule, basically small? White's king is also a bit secure. Is not a bit secure. A bit insecure. Black's bishop is not only very active, but also uh, serves as a magnificent defender of his own king, and black enjoys the superior pawn structure as well. Another problem for white's concern are the eternal search for a plan. Basically, he doesn't have a plan to be found. White has no play on the queen side or in the center, and aggressive outposting on the king side will rarely work because the bishop single-handedly protects the king. An example of this will be given in the notes that follow. Black, however, can generally generate queenside play by advancing his A and B pawn, a minor pawn attack, and also place pressure on E4 by rook C8 to C4. Basically, black can come out this. Black has this type of a positional play. He has rook here and then rook there to put some pressure on the position. All in all, it's thought to be equal, but I consider it to be somewhat dreadly for white, or Dreadly, I think that's how you pronounce that, for white's position. The game, I think this is the game if I'm not mistaken. Let's see if there's a... I guess there are draws. So, this is actually from a game. Continued with C3. Let's see if there's a game that goes with it. Huh? No. A3, rook C8, and then A3. Rook C4, like we talked about. Let's see if there's any games. Nope, no games found, so this must be one that he's found. The E-pawn is now under some heat. Oops, sorry, I had the wrong rook move. C4 is here. Rook A to E1. Starting a classical minor attack. Black intends to move his queen, play A5 or A7 to A5, then B5, play B7 to B5 as well, and then to B4 and kind of crack the position for white, trying to cause some weaknesses. Cracking white's queenside pawn structure, leaving him with yet another weakness to guard in that area. So white plays rooks. Wait a second. B5. That's the minor piece he was talking about. Rook F3. Queen C7. F takes G. H takes G. Rook H3. a5. Here comes the minor pawn advance. Rook f1, queen b7 is actually a sclam. This puts the fear back into white because now there's two pieces that are attacking, and white's going to have to move the rook back. Queen c5, which also offers equality, was played in the actual game. So queen c5 was actually played in the game. Queen h6 looks scary. If he tries queen h6, b4 was played at this point. A takes b4, then we'll go back after this. A takes b4. And white is under severe pressure. His queen side is falling apart. And as we've seen, the attacking leap of queen h6 just doesn't get the job done. But let's go back to move 25 here for white. After okay dokie. That's a problem. We have to actually make this here. Sorry, I gotta delete this here. Okay. Rook e1. My fault on that one. b4. A takes b. A takes b. And now white's position falls under the pressure. Hey, how you doing? Okay, now we're back to our position here. Now we got to look at a move. Queen h6, scary, very scary. But Dragon players and anyone that regularly fianchettos his kingside bishop knows that it's very hard to mate a king when the when defenders are uncontested. The basically fianchettoed bishop is uncontested. White doesn't have a dark square bishop to challenge it, and dark bishop to challenge it. Dark squared bishop defense of g7 and h8 after this incredible move for black. Rook takes e4 exclam. It's just beautiful. Black laughs at white's so-called attack with queen to h7. King f8. Isn't there anything for white? Rook takes f6. Rook g4 check. Leaves white having to choose between rook g3. White to choose between rook g3, which is this is the idea. Rook takes, h takes, and then e takes f6. 2 pawns up for black. So let's go back to, hold on, let me get to, oops, why isn't this working? Oh, gotcha. King f1 is I'm used to it being white. Queen h1 check. with a winning attack for black immediately. Rook f6 might seem to be a better move here. Instead of this, rook takes f6 seems to be better move order. Sorry, but this also falls to this move here. Rook takes e4 exclam. Rook takes g6 check. F takes g6. And then queen to g5. Rook e6 to hold on to the pawn. And white is in severe trouble at this point. There's not much that could be done at this point to stop basically black from crashing through. So this is a really interesting position. And let's see, there's a couple other lines that if he tried queen to h6 now, which is a mistake. This is actually a mistake. Queen to queen b6 wins on the spot. It's a winning move. It's over. And then if we go back to move 26, there's right here. If we try queen h6 here, then rook g4 lands on the board again. And there's really nothing that you can do at this point. We're going to call it, because our next one that we're going to be looking at tomorrow, we're looking at certain openings and looking at sacrifices. Piece sacrifice, not really for an attack, but for positional and imbalance understanding. So I wanted to thank you all for logging on, participating, and helping out. Remember, like what Bruce Lee says, take what you know, take what we know here. And oh, wait a second, we got to do a summary, don't we? Sorry about that. We're learning about. I almost forgot that, because we have to summarize of what we learned so that we can implement it into our play. We learned that it's important to, in some positions, go beyond what we're taught as stuff that's set in stone. Like if you're down a pawn, I'll show you the game that I'm talking about is right back here. This is the last game that we did for our Reassess Your Chess 1. This is right here. It's the Jeremy Silman game at this point. Oops, wrong one. Let's get to that point. Let me see here. Hold on. Sorry about that. Just give me a second. Here we go. I gotta turn the board so that we can get a perspective on what we're talking about right here. At this point, most of us would be in from what we've been trained as principles, that we don't want this one here. We're black. Our opponent just played g5, and so we're looking at, we need to take that. But if we took the pawn, the queen would flood in, the bishop would flood in, black would have a huge attack. We have to sometimes go against what we're taught in the principles and look at the principles, I guess, what I'm trying to say. There's a deeper principle than even the principles that we're taught. We're taught that you need to safety your king. In this position, white's position is totally wrecked in the center. And so Jeremy Silman explained to us that go to logic, not emotions, and that's why he played bishop g6, is that he went logically and understood that after takes, the king is safer, and now he can launch his attack. It ended up the game was a draw, but the whole idea was to show us that how imbalances, even for one pawn, could make the difference of a win for us, and to get past our fears of being down a pawn for our king's safety and for a better position. And so I think we've covered our that. So let's so now that was our summary. And so I want to, and now I got to do it again. You have to take, like what we say, take what you know and apply it. That's what Bruce Lee says. Yeah, sorry about forgetting that, because you know what? Sometimes you have to summarize to get better. And so we have to remember that it's important also, choices are, and the choice to receive the Lord Jesus, Lord and Savior of your life, as important. We have to decide one day what we're going to do with the Lord Jesus. And so that's the whole idea. And that's why the Team Chest Cruncher model is in place. Why we always say it. It's to ingrain into us. Like we were even looking at the imbalances. And this is the phrase that we do. We hang up our coats. We hang up our hats. We sit down and study when most won't. Team Chest Cruncher does, and that makes all the difference. And as Wesley So says through the Lord Jesus, as I say, God bless. And I'll see you next time on Chest Cruncher TV. Just TV. And we're going to push on forward. And so what we have to remember is what Hannibal Smith always said, that even inside of a random position, there's always a plan. There's always, we can take that and change the plan to there's always an imbalance that we can use to our ability. And we can also call that a plan too. And that's what we're learning, improving, and getting better. 2 thumbs up. Hoorah, be blessed. I'll see you tomorrow, Team Chest Cruncher, and we're going to learn some positional sacrifices with the Cataline. So I can't wait to show that with you. Bye bye, team.